Hello and welcome to this episode of Standard Deviation, my column and video series. Today I'm going to be speaking to you about how the laws of physics don't usually apply to the act of governance, but how the government of India could actually learn a lot from them. This will only benefit the business environment and also the citizens. The world of physics has several immutable laws, but the government of India has a fascinating ability to disregard them. Let's look at time travel first. Stephen Hawking once famously said that the proof that time travel does not exist is that we are not currently flooded by tourists from the future. However, it seems that he didn't factor in the Indian taxman, who's increasingly frequently jumping back in time to raise current revenues. This, of course, has to do with the government's repeated attempts at retrospective changes to tax laws. Now, back in 2021, the government earned a lot of rightful praise for doing away with the infamous retrospective tax provision brought in by then Finance Minister Pranab Mukherjee in 2012. But since then, the Narendra Modi government has ploughed ahead with several fresh retrospective demands of its own, one of which has been aided by the Supreme Court. The most recent of these is the Supreme Court's 14th August ruling saying that states can levy tax on mining companies with retrospective effect from April 2005 onwards. While this will entail a bounty for state governments like Odisha, it will also impose a massive burden, estimated at about 2 lakh crore rupees, on mining companies. Apart from the fiscal impact and the dent to business prospects, what's more important is this specter of retrospective taxation. Rather than laying it to rest as it should be, authorities in India are empowering it while ignoring the damage it will have on the already lackluster business confidence in the country. Similarly, the Budget 2024 proposal to do away with the indexation benefit for real estate long-term capital gains that are arising from sales after 2001 was another such retrospective move. After very loud backlash, the government rolled this back, but the damage to perception has already been done. If it weren't for the protests from its supporters and critics alike, this retrospective amendment would have remained in place. Something similar was done with debentures in last year's budget, but since there was no protest at the time, the retrospective provision has continued. The Income Tax Department already has the reputation of going back in time to raise tax notices for filings done years, if not decades ago. Seeking to change other tax rules to remove benefits with retrospective effect only reinforces this perception. Tax uncertainty is an infirmity that has long plagued India's governance structure, but there's no attempt being made to cure this illness. Now, we come to Newton's first law of motion. According to it, any object at rest or in motion remains in that state unless acted upon by an external force. We learnt this in school. Now, with India's governance, we're more concerned with the at rest part of this law than the at motion part. After all, it's nobody's argument that the Indian government is doing too much and must pause. Rather, what's happening in several cases is that the Indian government, and to an extent the state governments, are remaining at rest even when acted upon by a significant external force. And this is when movement would have several positive effects, not only on India's business environment, but also in terms of protecting its citizens. One notable example of this is crypto regulation. Yes, the government spearheaded the attempt in the G20 meetings it hosted to come up with an internationally agreed and applicable framework for the regulation of crypto assets. This is true. It has also said it will come up with its own regulations in line with the global standard. But since then, a few external forces have taken place that have made such rules much more urgent. Take what happened at the crypto exchange WazirX, for example. In one fell swoop, Indian investors in cryptocurrencies saw upwards of $230 million of their assets vanish due to a hack. After this, WazirX proposed a frankly ridiculous loss socialization solution where it would spread the loss over all its customers rather than confine it to those whose accounts were compromised. That is, it would take crypto assets from those who didn't face theft and distribute them amongst those who did. It has since backtracked somewhat on this, saying that this was just one of the options it was considering, but at no point has it ruled it out either. This is where an Indian regulator, whoever it is, RBI, SEBI, or a new regulator, needs to urgently step in. It's only through formal regulation that the Indian public can be protected against such one-sided actions by crypto exchanges. But it looks like the government remains at rest even though substantial external force is being applied. Forget Newton's first law. Another instance where this is the case has to do with the taxation on e-gaming services, which, by the way, also has a retrospective component. The issue is currently sub judice in the Supreme Court, but the crux of the matter is whether the GST Council can impose taxes on e-gaming companies with retrospective effect or not. Budget 2024 brought in a provision which had been agreed upon during a preceding GST Council meeting that allows the central and state governments to waive this retrospective tax if they feel it is right to do so. So far, however, no such decision has been taken by either the center or any of the states. This inaction has three impacts according to industry experts. The first is that smaller e-gaming companies are beginning to operate in the grey market to avoid taxes. The second is that several bigger companies are moving out of the country. And the third is that international companies previously looking optimistically at India are now pausing their plans to enter the market. There's a lot the government can learn from the world of physics. First, don't try jumping back in time. The costs are higher than the reward. Second, don't let inertia rule your actions, especially when acting quickly can bring security not just to companies but also to India's citizenry. But will the government go back to schoolbook physics? Your guess is as good as mine. But on that note, that's all from me. Thank you for watching.